Let's move on to one of the parents, or representing one of the parent organizations of the Living in Dodgy Movement. I mentioned the Organization for Agile and Smart Cities. And Martin Brynskov has been very active in designing this, in setting it up, and also in working with the organization. And I would say he's one of the key players in it. So I'm really pleased that Martin is able to join us today in person. Martin, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. You hear me well? Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Marcos, to the Alentejo region for the invitation to come here and speak. And it's lovely to finally, after so much time of working together, to be here. We have met Carmen so many times online, but now here on the ground, it's such a pleasure. So thanks so much. My name is Martin Brynskov, and as you say, Eddie, I'm here in person, and that is by choice and profound wish also to ensure that we can follow up on these things in person, because I think what we are addressing here, and I'll give some few examples, really takes, you need to see each other in the eye, because there's so much need to build close relations across the different levels. So I think, Eddie, we will not succeed unless we have these stakeholders together, trusting each other, that when we go the next step, it will hold. There will be, you know, our local future will be respected, our joint vision is strong, and that we will all pull. So both from the top down and from the bottom up. So let me start by telling you where I'm from, because I think that's important. My grandfather grew up in countryside on the island of Zealand in Denmark, 100 kilometers from Copenhagen. My grandmother grew up outside, in the rural area, outside of the second city of Denmark, Aarhus, in a small village. So they grew up in the rural area. They then met in Copenhagen, the capital of Denmark. They had my father, and he met my mother, and he was hired to join the university in Aarhus, the second city. So when they were moving there, before I arrived, they should decide where to live. Should they live in the academic ghetto in the city? Or should they get like a large garden, large house, out in the village, you know, 1 hour's drive or 3/4 outside. So what did they choose? They chose the rural area, where I grew up, and of course in close interaction with the city and so on. So I feel I grew up on this border between the very, very rural. I come from a community of 250 people, and I lived outside the community. So seeing all these layers and how difficult it is actually to get the other layer to take this perspective, I feel that's our starting ground. Because this is from, can I say, the old world. It has always been difficult. Now we add this layer of the digital. And we just heard the colleague, well, all the colleagues actually addressing different parts of these ecosystems. Well, if it's difficult to address in the real world, trying to do it somehow in this new emerging digital domain, it's just complexity multiplied with complexities. So my first piece of advice, and I think what we have instilled in the movement of living in EU, is that we start in the real world, we can say it like that, and then we ensure that the alliances we forge there are reflected on the digital, so that some new dynamics that come from the digital don't overtake or undermine what we have established. So that would be my first point. Second, I think we then need to understand what is the relationship between projects and communities. And communities, I mean communities around projects. I think this is very much a community around some key projects. We have Aurora here, we have Rural, we have ET for Regions, we have many others. But what we have learned, I think, collectively is that one project is just a project. You do the effort, you win, you run it, it's done, and then the agenda moved on. So how can we ensure that these investments that are made on all levels, local, national, regional, EU level, that they're actually, all these ships are drawing in the same direction. Maybe 5 or 10 years ago it was not felt so urgent. But I think now with the geopolitical situation, I mean with the public health and COVID, sure, but also now the security situation makes it imperative for Europe to find a path and to use every force that's available. Yeah? We have to use all of it wisely. But how can we do that without top-down describing all the actions in all the projects? Then they're not resonating with the local priorities or personal priorities. So we have to find this middle ground or common ground that we can all agree on, and then we go and do different things. I'm a fairly technical person, so what we bring, what OAS brings, is a strong voice, a very diverse voice of communities, of local authorities, mostly from Europe, but also around the world. And there is no way, ever, to align all of it. Never. I mean, why would we have local politicians if there was not, disagreement on things? So what is what we can agree on, and what is where we can do politics and ensure that our cultures and identities are seen? So on the technical level, what we've been working with the colleagues from Eurocities, from the European Network of Living Labs, from Committee of the Regions, from particular regions here, marked us with Aurora, I think very, very strongly and positively reaching out to your network among the regions and the local areas. What we have been trying to define is then what in the digital domain would be this common ground. And we call that minimal interoperability. And what are the mechanisms that need to be defined? That could go into European legislation, eventually, like we have for geospatial information. So every municipality, all the 80, 90,000 European municipalities, they have the legal obligation to know where people are, to know where house buildings are. Well, they want, because otherwise you cannot tax them, and otherwise you cannot manage it. Yeah, that's sure. But it's the law. And what's coming now, of course, we have seen GDPR about personal data. That is now, we're trying to find what is a good way to legislate about these things. But there will be, and that is also being addressed quite strongly and increasingly strongly by the European Commission, there will be legislation about interoperability. So how all these systems will play together. If we don't do anything, we will have a very bad legislation about interoperability. And unfortunately, all 80, 90,000 municipalities will have to implement this bad law. Let's try to avoid that. And let's try to use the strength there is in European legislation, formulated as local laws. Let's try and use that strength to move in a direction which is in line not only with Europe. I mean, what is Europe? It's a big thing, right? Some people come and go, we know. But in line with what we collectively want and where we want to go. But ensuring that on the ground here locally, in Evora, in my hometown of Maria Magdalena, yes, that's the name of the little place, that we can actually also see our future. So that's what we will be working on, and we will be working with you, and we will work way beyond the projects. We will work because we have strong links through many, many colleagues and through our collaboration, and I would say our joint future. So we can be much more concrete, Eddie, if we want to go into what is the fair artificial intelligence minimal interoperability mechanism. I don't think that's the forum here, but I'm happy to discuss. But we're here, and we're here to support good local futures. So So thank you for the invitation. Thank you for your time here also, and I'm very happy to engage with you and with the colleagues as you wish.
Any questions for Martin? No. But yes, don't call in. You need to go up on the stage just because otherwise people can't see.
And in reality, it's just because Eddie wants us in front of the European.
Exactly.
Please tell who you are and where you're from, so that colleagues know.
I'm Stefan Banya. I'm representing the company Bavenir, part of the Aurora project from Solar Republic. My question is regarding the legislation of the interoperability mechanism. So, what we are talking about, minimum whatever interoperability, it's a very dynamic thing, which is evolving. And how do you see the potential legislation of something which is so much evolving in time, because the legislation will always have certain kind of delays, so we agree on something, it goes to the act in 1 year or even later. So how do you think or whether there are any kind of examples already of that time? That's the question. Thank you.
You want to go first, Eddie, and then
No, I'd love to hear what you advise us on the legislation, but you're right, it needs to be dynamic legislation that can be adapted. Very good point. There you go. Okay.
Thank you for that very, very important question. So first of all, I think the first thing to take in mind is that legislation needs to be as little as possible, but sufficient. So we need to put the core principles in the legislation, and then the details will be updated. So what we do in the Living in EU movement is that we have the declaration, which is quite standard. Then we have the specifications of the minimal interoperability, which is an evolving document. But you can refer to it. So you can version it. You can say, okay, so we refer to this document. If you want a particular version, you can take version 5, which is the one that's been delivered now. But I think we even have it, you asked for a good example, the INSPIRE directive, which is the geospatial information, which every municipality needs to implement. It's already working on that. It's based on, European decisions, but in line with ISO, the International Standardization Organization. So I think we already know how to do it. It's just a new field where we need to find out what is the common ground. The problem is everybody wants to own it, and we need to bring it into a governance that observes the different voices, not only Brussels, but also the local. That would be my simple answer.
Martin meant the city of Brussels. Anyway, thank you very much, Martin. Martin is still here, so you can always ask.